Welcome to Swade Soul, another edition of Swade Soul, and we got an incredible guest for you today, Mr. Joe Newman. And I don't even want to begin to talk about the many talents and give him a moniker in one place because this man is incredible, Mr. Newman. I want to thank you for being on the Swade Soul show today. How are you today?
I'm really good, Harold, and I really appreciate you having me on. It's very nice and very, very nice.
So no, I wanna, I've known you for a long time. This gentleman here has been a mentor to me. He's taught me a lot of things when it comes to just even in business and marketing on the ways we have connected with each other. He's become a friend, someone I've known for over a decade. So, with all that being said, I want to bring him into the show and get right down to it, Mr. Newman. So let's talk about, I want to start off right off and let everybody who know who Joe Newman is. So let's talk about your childhood. So give us an insight on how you started in this life living lesson and tell us about Joe Newman in that aspect.
Well, I appreciate, you're being very modest, Harold. I've really enjoyed having you as part of the ABA for the last 10, 12, 13 years. And as I've said to you and to many people many times through the years, you're probably one of the brightest, most perceptive people that we've ever had in the ABA. So I feel it's just terrific to have you a part of the ABA, a part of my life. Good man. That being said,
Thank you,
I'm
sir.
80. I'm
Thank you for
83
that.
years old, Harold, and I've retired in 1983. I've retired in 1996. I came out of retirement to start with the ABA with a partner who was the co-founder of the original ABA and the co-founder of the original Indiana Pacers. But going way back, I am from New York. Even though I was born in Baltimore, we consider ourselves New Yorkers because my parents were, and my dad was in broadcasting. So we traveled around the country, and it happened to be at a very short period of time when he was in Baltimore that I was born, and when the next day went back to New York. They were both very liberal people, and they, way before the subject of civil rights existed, it did exist, but in the very earliest days, they hated discrimination, they hated bigotry, they hated racism, and they raised my 8 brothers and sisters, there were 9 of us, to have the same feelings. And they were very vocal long before the Civil Rights Act, long before much of the changes that developed in the 60s and into the 50s and 40s. They were very outspoken about their lack of tolerance for anyone who was intolerant. And so wherever we went, and because Dad was in broadcasting, we not only lived in New York, but we lived in many parts of the Deep South. Lived in Louisiana, we lived in Mississippi, we lived in Florida, we lived in Virginia in the height of segregation and the height of where racism really reared its ugly head. But my 4 brothers and sisters and I did not believe in that. And as a result of that, we very early on respected people for who they are, not the color of their skin, not their religion, not their nationality. And that's the way we grew up, and that became a part of our life. And because we were not wealthy, but fairly well-to-do, we, much of the time, even though we lived in the Bronx and we lived in Brooklyn, where there was much more integration during that period, we lived on Long Island on the North Shore and did not have everyday direct exposure to the Black community or the Hispanic community, but we certainly did when we were in New Orleans or Waveland, Mississippi, or Gulfport, Mississippi, or Jacksonville, Florida, West Palm Beach, Florida, Richmond and Petersburg, Virginia. So we really saw racism at its worst, and were very strong against it. And that's as a young person, that's the way we felt. But I did not have a chance to really make an impact in that area until I was a little bit older, and shortly after I went into the ad agency business when I ultimately, after I got out of the Army, came to Indianapolis, Indiana, which was so proud of the lack of African Americans in the city, so proud that they were not like, quote, New York, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, as if that was a badge of honor because they did not have the problems that Philadelphia, Baltimore, et cetera, were having with the fact that they were growing numbers and percentages of the African American or the Black population. So when I came here and I saw that, I said, just out of the Army, very, very young, I said, you know what? I'm going to change this. I'm going to change this. Okay. No Black radio station, no Blacks in radio and TV, redlining of houses, and a myriad of other things that bothered me as an individual. And so I started to do something about it. And I think at that particular point, I started to make a difference. Early on, I was one of the people behind Indiana Black Expo, which became the largest Black Expo in the country. The first year they had it, when Reverend Sanders and Charles Williams had it, it was a show that was exactly opposite of what the Black community should be doing. There was a lot of music, there was a lot of sports, and there was no substance. And it bothered me because they were creating and perpetuating the same stereotype that the Black America was mired in. And so I said, look, in order for this to be relevant, we need to talk about subjects that you're not talking about. And it includes economic empowerment, and it included education, and it included housing, and it faced directly into the systemic racism that existed, even though here it was sort of under the table. We had to bring it out in the open, and we need to put relevancy into Black Expo. And fortunately, because I had an ad agency with some power at that point, I was able to bring very bright young people who went on to great careers in Indianapolis in broadcasting and community and involvement and social changes and justice, so that Indianapolis really improved dramatically and helped bring the first Black radio station on the air, WTLC Radio, which became one of the great models of Black radio in the United States, and got great people into broadcasting and great people into advertising agencies and TV and radio sales, and caught the attention of a lot of people. So ultimately, my ad agency, which was pretty good, and I handled a lot of very big accounts, my ad agency became representative of all the developing Black business that came in Indianapolis. So I really prospered from it, but I didn't do it because of that. It turned out to be that way. And I think Indianapolis became better for it. And I started to get a lot of accolades for what I was doing, and not the kind of resistance that one might have expected. Why? Because what I had was economic clout. I mean, radio stations and TV stations and businesses could not say no to me because I had a large advertising agency. Well, I became the ad agency of the Home Builders Association. And guess what? Home building started to bring into the Black community. I helped start the first Black bank in Indianapolis, Midwest National Bank, and explained how set-asides worked and minority investments worked and so forth. And subsequently, I was able to generate some economic clout and put some pressure on the other banks and to make an impact on the redlining that was going on, because I was handling most of the major subdivisions in Indianapolis. And so all of that really gave me the opportunity to do what I always wanted to do. And then the Indiana State Police was sued because of their lack of minority recruitment. And they came to me because I was known for what I'm doing and said, we need to put a class of black trainees into the academy because we have been sued to increase the number of minority uh, members of the Indiana State Police. And so Superintendent DeBard gave me $100,000, and I said, okay. I spent $20,000, but I did not do it in a racial way. I used media, but not the message. The message was we were looking for good people, but I used the media in Fort Wayne and in the Northeast Indiana, in Gary and Hammond, and in Evansville, and of course in Indianapolis. And we put in 40 minorities and women into the academy, and when that happened, that graduating class of 40 black troopers graduated with the second highest grade in the history of the academy, and they all looked like Quinn Buckners. I mean, I had an army of beautiful people, but as I said to the Superintendent DeBard, who was a good man, and his successor, Superintendent Shuttle, I said, the problem you have is you have white troopers all over Indiana, and we don't know whether they can accept black troopers or not, and we don't know whether their captains and their assignees are going to treat these people properly. So I said, what I want to do is I want to have sensitivity training, and I want to go in and just meet with all the black troopers around the United States to be able to integrate these wonderful young people that I brought into the academy into the Indiana State Police. Well, the FBI heard about that, and so the FBI hired me, took me to Washington, and flew me in on the FBI's plane, and I get to explain not to J. Edgar Hoover or whoever was in there at the time what I was doing and why not only the recruitment of minorities was important to law enforcement, but notice I'm married, but also that they had to be brought into it as full-fledged members, treated properly, and not put into black areas and putting black troopers in the black areas while all the white troopers were going into the white areas. I said, what you need to do is give them some sensitivity training. And because the troopers are good people, I'm talking about the white troopers, are good people, but never really had an opportunity to have anybody talk to them like that. The way they brought them in was so good. Ultimately, one of my graduates, I'm not calling them my graduates, but one of my graduates ultimately became the superintendent of the Indiana State Police. That's how good they were. And they became commanders and lieutenants and exhibited the same qualities they had as part of the academy. So to me, that's one of the highlights of my career, but it really didn't stop there. It really started there. And
well, you're right. And I want to ask a question about your interaction with one of the most famous people that we all know is KFC, Colonel Sanders. Tell a story on how your interaction with Colonel Sanders came about.
Well, that's really an interesting question. I got out of the Army and came here from Greenville, South Carolina, where I was on WFBC TV at that time, and I did television shows, real estate shows in different cities. And I happened to go to Greenville, South Carolina, didn't like it here, and I worked with my dad, who has since passed away, and we had a show called The House Detective. And he and I was very good at selling realtors and builders to come on that show. And he said, Joe, why don't you go to Indianapolis, Indiana? I'd never heard of Indianapolis, but go to Indianapolis, Indiana, and we'll put the show on there, and then see if you can open up additional shows in additional cities. So I opened up shows in St. Louis, Minneapolis, Detroit, Indianapolis and Wheeling, West Virginia. This before videotaping or during the early days of videotaping. And I did the shows in all of those markets. I actually drove one day around this cycle in the Midwest and did the house detective. I made nice money, had a good time. And my son Bobby was born. And I said to my dad, I don't want to be gone 5 days a week. Or my wife had become pregnant with my first son. And I said, I want to be home more. And he said, no, you have to do all these shows. I said, no, let's hire people to do those shows, but I'm not going to do this anymore. So I went to work as a salesperson for a local television station that had been trying to recruit me because they couldn't understand how my television show, my 1 hour house detective, had more advertisers on it than the entire station had on it, what I was doing as a salesperson. So I went to that TV station, the local CBS affiliate, and had a job. And I worked there for 17 months. And during that period, one of my largest accounts, an automobile company, a used car dealer, who was spending at that time $250,000, $500,000 a year, which at that time was a big budget for automobiles, said to me one day, kid, how come I don't get to advertise on the other TV stations like I used to? And I said,
Sweet